says we're live. I guess we'll see if we get any comments and people can confirm if we're live or not. Good morning, LinkedIn and YouTube world. Are we live? I guess we'll find out. I don't see anything, but that doesn't mean anything. So first and foremost, thank you all for joining us on this inaugural episode. Jamie, thank you so much for being the guinea pig and trying to iron out all the kinks. I still can't see if we're live, so I guess we'll just trial and error and learn. Are you looking at your phone maybe to see if it'll show?
Yeah, I'm looking to see if it's gone live on LinkedIn.
Okay, I see it now. I see a little delay, awesome. Which is actually probably good. Yeah. It's kind of strange, though, because I see myself off to the side. And anyway, the whole purpose of this podcast is to tell the story that's not on the resume. And so my purpose of creating this podcast is to amplify the signal, right? Like we see people all the time that are saying, commenting for reach, right? Sharing this for, more visibility, all of those things. And so the purpose of us sitting here today is I want to share your story and hopefully that it will resonate with some people. Maybe it can get you some traction on your job search. And really just the entire point of having the networks that we have is to help one another. And so that is my purpose with this podcast. So Jamie is my first guest. Very thankful for you being the guinea pig. And I already have two more lined up. So we'll see what the natural cadence makes sense for this. Using Riverside currently as a platform. We'll see if that ends up being the final solution. But let's get into it. So Jamie, first and foremost, thank you so much for being here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know that you gave us a little bit of a teaser in that intro video, but please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Jamie Amos. I hold my SHRM CP certification. I've been a HR professional for just over 11 years, even coming up to 12 this April. As you can tell, talk a little bit differently to the rest of the American audience for now. And I originally, my career back home in the UK started off as a police officer. I moved over to the States in the summer of 2012 and had to kind of like start again. I don't have a degree. I went to university, but that style of learning wasn't for me at the time. And I set myself a career goal of getting into the police. Surpassed that goal. I got into the police within about 18 months, and the goal originally was 5 years. And started as a police constable, as we're called in the UK, at the age of 22 in March 2009. A chance meeting when I came out to Cincinnati to see a friend from the UK led to me. I know this is, the old romantic story, but I met a girl from Cincinnati, and 18 months later, I was taking a sabbatical from my role in the police and moving to a city I'd never really heard of before, let alone been to before I went and saw my friend. And I kind of had to start from scratch. Initially, my career started in security work at the casino, the Horseshoe it was, when they opened in 2013. It was February 2013. I helped to open the property on the night shift there. About 3 months after we opened, I got internally promoted to a supervisor role onto second shift, where we'd work 3 till 11:30 most nights. And then about a year after that, having led that team, I got recruited by the existing HR team to come in as their training and engagement specialist on their training team. And that's kind of where my career took off. Worked in a couple of different entertainment areas, transitioned into really factory manufacturing work for a couple of years, even had a little stint in the tech space. And I'm currently in my final week in the brewing and hospitality space with Mad Tree Brewing Company, and my journey of trying to find the next fit for me and the next step in my career is underway and really gets going after Friday.
So, Jamie, obviously the point of this is what's not on your resume. I know you gave us a really great high level overview of your background and your experience. What's not on your resume that you want to make sure that our viewers learn about you?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest strengths is my natural ability to communicate and build relationships with others. I've always kind of joked that I could start a conversation with a wall if I needed to. There's no such thing as a room full of strangers for me. I've really found that as I've kind of broadened my networking skills, particularly here in Cincinnati, where we're really blessed to have a great group of HR professionals throughout the whole, metropolitan and tri-state area. And one of the things that I first really got known for when I started in HR at the casino was how I would know everybody's name. I think some of that comes from my prior training as a police officer in the UK. We relied heavily on our communicative skills and putting names to faces. And really, like I think we had 1,200 people, and I probably knew about 1,000 people's names as we'd pass in the corridor. But that kind of came from really trying to look at people more than just a number, more than just a body. And, there's such a big difference with using someone's name versus sir, madam, mom, you, mate, or anything like that. And really, the idea came from the fact that everyone walked around with a name badge. Mm-hmm. And, once I used that name badge 3, 4, 5 times, I then had that name down, and my brain could connect to, right, that's Dave, that's Steve, that's Aaliyah, and Maria, and that really just allowed it to cement home the importance of using someone's name and making them feel like they belong. I think also what I bring from my background is I really have the ability to bring empathy. And that's something I've really honed in on in the last 11 years, and being in HR has really cemented that. Bringing empathy to any situation that you're coming across. I think it also is about bringing your authentic self. I'm not someone who tries to fake it till I make it. I think that can be a pro and it can be a con sometimes. Mm-hmm. But I think I want people to know what they're getting when they're with me. I'm someone who I care deeply about others. I think I've always been in some kind of a service-led role. I think that there was a question we looked at earlier about, what did I want to be when I was a kid? Mm-hmm. And for me, I never really knew what I wanted to do. When we were in high school, and in the UK, you graduate high school at 16. You then spend the next 2 years preparing for university by going to either like a sixth form college or a further education establishment. And I actually did 3 years, because when I left high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So the first year, I took 4 completely different subjects. I took media studies, IT, accounting, and sports coaching.
Oh, wow.
I really enjoyed the sports coaching element. I've been coaching soccer since I was 15, as well as playing it all my life. And really found a passion for that. And I restarted the following year by leaning into a fully integrated sports program. So I didn't even graduate the further education piece until I was 19. Went to university for what was a football studies, to translate for the audience, a soccer studies degree, which I thought was going to lean more into my coaching. And, when I found out it wasn't for me, I knew I couldn't just drop out of college. I spoke with a careers advisor. I spoke with my parents and friends and people I knew. And that's where I set that career goal of joining the police. I know kind of chasing the squirrel there, but I think that's where I've always kind of been in a position of wanting to be of service to people. Mm-hmm. And helping them in whatever way I can. I think, joining the police for me was about more so helping and assisting the victims of crime and getting them through, a whole range of different situations. And that was probably where I did my best work, when I was involved in those kind of circumstances. Mm-hmm. And it's probably where I built the best relationships within HR, is where I'm supporting folks through tough times. It may be professionally, it may even be personally, but lending that ear, listening to them, and trying to guide them in the right direction, or working through their options is something I find really valuable.
So then when you're thinking about the transition that you're currently going through, are you specifically targeting certain industries, or is there a certain, culture that you're looking for?
If you look at my resume on my LinkedIn profile, I've kind of had a variety of different industries that I have been in. For me, I'm not tied into staying in a certain lane when it comes to industry. I've found that whether it's been the casino, the aquarium when I worked at Newport, manufacturing, which I was in Fine Tool, more on the corporate side when I was at Easyway, even the tech space with Stack, and now back into the hospitality space, but more on that kind of craft brewing side with MadTree. I think every industry offers something a little bit different, whether that's the challenge, whether that's the perks, whether that's the situations that you'll come across.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you learn something different, and it only strengthens you as a professional when you do that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What kind of culture or leadership style would you say brings out the best in you? Because obviously, I mean, there's one thing about being in transition, right? Is that if you look at it from a opportunity standpoint, you have the opportunity to handpick and find the culture, the leadership style that will bring out the best in you and make you most effective. And so being really clear on that up front should help you in, as you're searching. What have you identified as far as leadership style and culture of an organization that's going to bring out the best in you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Nicole, and I kind of was thinking about that over the last 24 hours when we kind of talked the other day to think about what should we cover in this first episode. I think for me, uh, for myself personally, I'm looking for a team that I can join, that has room for me to be mentored, guided, developed, and invested in. Ever since I left the casino, I've not been on an HR team that's any bigger than really 3 people, and that brings its challenges sometimes. I was in the casino. We had 1,200 people on staff ish by the time I left. And in the HR team, we probably had anywhere between 12 and 15 people at any one time. And it was more that traditional, everyone was segregated into a different role that they played. So we had employee relations, we had training and engagement and development in one team, we had recruitment, we had benefits and administration and analytics, and then the leadership roles that came, above that. But while we had our lanes, we also were a team that jumped in and dived in to help each other. And that's how we kind of got exposed to our different areas. And I really got my grounding in HR. The first 6-7 years was very engagement, culture, and training based, and internal communications, which that's really where I make the most difference, I feel. But, it also showed me the different areas where HR makes a difference. And, I was the first impression for most of the team members that came through our doors in those first 5 years of the casino. So I was also a friendly face that these team members knew they could come to. They knew me by name. We would talk in the corridors, in the break room, but they knew they could come to me if they had a question, and I would get them to the right location, at least triage it. So I enjoyed that. I think sometimes when you're in a smaller team, and maybe you're limited on the experiences within that team, you sometimes don't grow in the areas you'd like to, because especially if you're like me, where you want to try and do things the right way, you don't necessarily get that grounding and that foundation and how to do it properly to then be able to problem solve and explore beyond those proper mythologies. So I'm looking for a team that I can join where it's not just me in the HR role. I think at this point in my career, I'm not ready to step into that manager role necessarily, unless it was part of a bigger team where there was that structure that already existed, where I could learn and pick up from others on my team above me. I think the best way that I learn is show me, teach me, let me. I think I'm not someone who can just read a book and put it into action, or can just go and do that course and suddenly be able to do it. I think if you go into like a structured like training, you go away for 2-3 days with the subject matter expert and you're learning from them, or you're taught how the company wants you to do it or has been doing it for the last 10, 15, 20, 50 years, depending on the size and age of the company. And then using that alongside my prior experiences to then start making a difference. You know, when you really think about settling into a job, it takes 6 to 12 months before you're even really comfortable to where you feel like you can start diving in, making suggestions, making changes. And that's something that's important to me there, where there's a mixture of grace and patience to allow me to get to know and understand my role and the role of those around me, and to then grow into making an impact. I think I'm looking for an organization that continues to be people and empathetic led. I think that is such a missed point sometimes. And I know, you know, there's this whole kind of like balancing equation right now with HR of being a strategic partner, but continuing to meet the needs of your team members as well. And I think you can't lose sight of that. If you completely become strategic and numbers led, you lose the people side where you can really make a difference that doesn't always show initially on spreadsheets, right? And in the data. But if you have the patience to really make that a big part of who you are, it goes a long way in the long run. I think when I was at Newport Aquarium, they're actually owned by Hirsch Family Entertainment. And the CEO there, Andrew Wechsler, and the Hirsch family are still very heavily involved. But that was a company that really taught me about the value of people. I was there during COVID, and just the actions taken by senior leadership during that time, even at the corporate level, spoke volumes about who that company was. And since I've left, I've seen them continue to grow in the way in which they look after their employees and their team members. I think they even offer like a completely free tuition program through an online university for their employees. And some of their employees are seasonal, school level, college level students that, you know, this is something that's going to help them in the long run as they develop their career. And then ever since the aquarium as well, and even more cemented in my year with Madry here, is, you know, finding a company that is more than just about making money and, you know, doing their business, but also has that societal and environmental commitment from a sustainability standpoint and making a difference. That's something that I've really connected with since going to the aquarium. I think there is a lot that can be said for doing that, and actually encouraging your team members to do that, because it unlocks a passion that sometimes people don't know they have until they do it, right? But that's kind of what I'm looking for. In terms of roles, I'm currently a people strategy business partner at Madry. I think, you know, I would be open to other HRBP roles if it was at an entry level where I had peers and leaders that I could learn from and pick up the skill sets that I need to grow in. I think anything in the engagement space where I can make a difference with what I've done before, especially at the aquarium, if you look on my LinkedIn page and even speak to some of the folks like Kevin Smith, the director there, some of the programs that I was able to build with him and with the team members there are still in effect today, that they're evolved and they've continued to grow. But there's a sense of joy that comes with creating something that really encourages that gratitude attitude that I think is sometimes missing in the workplace. I think far too often we tie things in to money and, you know, what do I get for it? That we've lost just the true meaning of what recognition means, right? And I think recognition is about letting someone know that they're making a difference, no matter how big or how small that is. And, you know, whether it's someone opening the door for you or diving in to help you get a project done on time, there's a lot that can be said for those kind of personality traits in the workplace and the culture that then produces. So that's kind of, you know, specialist, generalist roles. I'm even open to recruiting. I've done recruiting in a lot of different roles. A lot of it has been self-led in just the situations I've been in. This role with Madry was the first time I actually got the joy of using an ATS, and it, boy, does it make your life a lot more easier than having an Excel spreadsheet that you're trying to keep on top of and tracking. But I'd love to go into an environment where I could use my relationship building skills and my ability to make a great first impression of an organization in the recruitment space and learn the proper talent acquisition foundations to make myself stronger in that area. Things like when you're coming up with job descriptions, what are you looking for when you're assessing the job that you're looking to fill? What's important? What's legal that needs to be on those job descriptions? I've always had people doing those things above me. I've never kind of been brought in to see how that's done. And that's something that interests me a little bit in my growth. I'm only in my upper 30s. I've got a heck of a long way of working in my career to go. And, I think there's still a lot that can be learned in the foundational areas of HR to make me stronger.
So you used ATS for the first time. Which one were you using?
Could you just repeat that a little bit?
I said you used an ATS for the first time. What one were you using?
It was Rippling.
Oh, okay.
So Rippling, I believe they kind of started out in the Pacific area,
yes,
over in like Asia and Australasia, kind of then worked their way through to Europe. And in the last like 3 to 5 years, maybe, have started slowly but surely integrating with the US market. We're a hospitality business, and Rippling right now is still very much built towards that Monday through Friday kind of office environment. And we've learned a lot since transitioning in July, but it's a really great platform that is modern. They develop all their own software internally within it, and they're building new integrations all the time. Things like Basecamp, Slack, that can like tie in with your onboarding processes, and they're very automation savvy. That while my manager, my director currently has done a lot of the heavy lifting with that, it's been interesting to see just how much we've learned in these first 6 months in terms of how to utilize the ATS and also the HRIS of Rippling.
Yeah. So I want to go back on something, and we talked about this earlier when we chatted before. So when you say, and I hear HR professionals say this a lot, right? When you say, I'm not a numbers person, or I don't want to just focus on the numbers, is it that you aren't a numbers person, or is it that you don't understand and you have not been explained the people impact of what those numbers mean? Because obviously the numbers drive the business, and I'm a huge numbers person because I look at the numbers to tell me what's going on in the business. So if turnover's really high, right? And if turnover's really high with a specific pocket of the business, like, do we have a leadership issue? I mean, there are predictive analytics with the numbers that can tease out people issues. And I think that maybe when people get uncomfortable with numbers, it's just because they don't have a really great comfort level with what those numbers are predicting.
Yeah, I think, we talked about this quite a lot last week, right? I think it's a mixture of two. I think there is, and some of this comes from just me. I can come across as very confident and very outgoing, and that is my energy. I'm sure everyone watching right now is probably predicting where I lie on the DISC assessment, or even on the 5 strengths, and they'd probably be quite on the money when it comes to me. I am kind of that energy and that hype guy when it comes to HR. But when it comes to the numbers side of things, I think there's a level of intimidation for me. Because of the way I've come through HR, I've not been schooled through university learning, doing kind of data analysis classes or alongside that. I also, in my background as a police officer, I have a natural knack and ability to just strategically analyze people, right? Like I can't kind of, it's weird that I can't really dive into like how I know or what I know, but when I'm looking at people, I'm looking at their body language, their energy, their eye contact, their smile, the way they're walking. And that's telling me a lot about how they're feeling, right? You can see a lot just by what people aren't saying, just as much as what they are saying, right? And that's something that I have a natural knack for kind of picking up on. And I think that would be complementary to the strategic and numerical data and analysis side. but I haven't been really guided or taught about that, or I've just been in such fast-paced growth environments that no one's had the bandwidth or the time and patience to sit down with me and kind of give me that foundation in what does this mean? What am I looking for? Just to even give me enough of an intermediate foundation where I can utilize that alongside my other strengths and as part of the team to contribute. I think that's something I've thought about a lot in the last week since we kind of discussed that.
So thinking about continuous improvement and feedback, this is a question that I ask basically everybody I encounter, especially in an interview type situation. What would you say is the most useful feedback that you've ever received, and what did you do with it? Because the gift of feedback is to have the opportunity to do something with it.
Yeah, I think there's probably 3 pieces of feedback that I've kind of received that has helped me, because I'm naturally a people pleaser in terms of, my ability to connect with folks and want to be empathetic towards folks and understand what they're going through. Always makes me, and I think there's a strength to this that allows me to look at how I can look beyond the norms to see how we can solve problems, right? I think that's something that I've always been good at, especially latter in my stages in HR. The first 5 years, I kind of was just learning a lot. But in the last 5 years in particular, I've learned a lot more about how to kind of really dive into that. But feedback-wise, I think you're not always going to please everyone. There's always going to be someone disappointed in a decision you make or communications you send out. And that's just human nature, right? We're all different. And that's one of the things I love about LinkedIn as a network. Shameless plug because we're on there live right now. But I think there's no strategy from me in terms of how I grow my network in LinkedIn other than trying to get folks from all different backgrounds, countries, areas of the US, not just HR, people that are, thought challengers, and just listening to their experiences and approaches to different problems has really opened my eyes to kind of knowing that, that diversity of thought is just so powerful. That also it's going to be a challenge in the workplace too, because people are going to have different opinions. They're going to have different ways in which they should do things. And I think the thing that I have seen organizations time and time again prevent them from breaking through with that is avoiding the why. Like I know, the why has been a big proponent of the work by Simon Sinek over the years, right? And that's kind of like towards your own personal why a lot of the time. But I think when businesses are making decisions, I think there's always going to be naysayers and negativity, right? But if you can get those folks on the fence to at least understand why you've made a certain decision when you deliver that message, and you deliver it not on the day and you try and kind of build up to it, you're preparing people to better understand that decision. And I think that's something I've always tried to put in my communications when I've done internal communications is if we're communicating something, we need to explain the why, because that's going to at least convert half of those fence goers from falling into that negativity trap, right? And that's going to make a difference to where they're a B or a C rather than a D or F in terms of their feeling towards the company. And then from an empathetic standpoint, it's putting yourself in other people's shoes when they're telling you what's going on. One thing I've taken from MadTree in this past year, part of our culture we've got our 3 values, our 3 behaviors that we call our 3 core behaviors are to connect, grow, and give a fuck. I apologize for the expletive deleted there, but that's part of the culture. And really on the connection side, we have a point that we go over called assume positive intent.
Yes.
And I think 9 times out of 10, when a human makes a mistake, they're not going into it to make a mistake, to mess up, to cause an issue to the business themselves or their colleagues. Yes. They're genuinely trying to do the right thing. They just either don't have the experience and knowledge to make the right decision, the skill set, or they've just never been kind of presented with that situation, or they don't know where to go to in order to make that correct decision. And I think far too often in coaching these days, and probably it's probably been centuries of improper coaching in the workplace, right? Is that we don't try to find out why they made that decision that led to that mistake. Instead, we try to just correct the mistake and think they're going to learn from it. But this is where that why kind of comes back into. Is like, if you put yourselves in their shoes, no one feels good when they mess up. No one feels great about themselves when they're getting coached.
Right.
And that shouldn't be the only time we're having those coaching conversations, which kind of goes alongside. I've always been about that gratitude attitude in everything that I do. I think, thanking people for the little things that they do each and every day go a long way, because you don't know what they're going on in their personal life either. And that's a big proponent of what I try and do, whether I interact with someone every day or once every other week. I want to try and find a connection with them and bring that up in conversation where it's more than just about work.
Yeah. Thinking about your career, who would you say has had kind of the greatest impact on your career?
Yeah, I think there's probably 3 people professionally that have really impacted me. I think first off, it was probably Wendy Kovar, who was the training manager that gave me that chance in HR in the casino. She saw something in me that, I'd never even thought about a career in HR before. And, going back to that story, I actually got approached 3 times by the HR team before I actually applied for the role that they were looking at me to join the team. I'd never been in a position where I've been kind of like, even though it was internal, like headhunted before. And while it was very flattering, it was a strange situation to find myself in, because I've always tried to be committed to where I work and be there for the long run. And she really unlocked that potential. But then alongside that first HR team that I was on, that casino HR team with the likes of Tamiko, Jack, Jen, Shauna, Christian, Aaron, Nick, Brandy, Tamika, Shani, Deborah, Lisa Rexroach Steele, Megan, all at parts, and even Ladorn, like all at parts played a role in shaping me for who I am. But also showed me just what teamwork looked like in an HR setting. Like, we were all in it together. In the latter stages of my career in HR at the casino, we were 24/7, 365, right? And a lot of our engagement activities over the years, we learned that there was always going to be one shift that was going to be disappointed when we held something, because that was the challenge that we faced on a daily, right? Because you had people that worked different days of the week, different times of the day. So like the last couple of years that I was there, we actually started doing a grave shift appreciation night, where the whole HR team, who normally work Monday through Friday, 9 till 5, the whole HR team came in and did the whole night shift and did activities that kind of like covered a little bit of everything that we did throughout the year, solely for our grave shift team that worked overnight in the casino. And, those were a real hit. We were doing karaoke in the break room. We had prizes. We used it as a chance to educate our team members on benefits, deal with any employee relations concerns, things like that, prize drawings. But that went a long way to like letting them know that, yeah, we see you, and we're willing to do this for you. Now, could we have done it more often? Probably. But that was in the very early stages of my career. And I learned a lot through like trying to accommodate for folks where you can. Yes. But again, understanding that when you then move to grave shift, guess what? Day shift's going to be disappointed that you're not doing that with them, even though they're the ones that regularly got the engagement activities.
Sure.
I think next off would be Kevin Smith. He's the director of HR and safety at the Newport Aquarium. Okay. He brought me in after I'd had a brief stint outside of HR at the casino. I realized that HR is where I needed to be to make a difference. And Kevin really allowed me to get my confidence back. As a leader, Kevin kind of lent on my experiences that I'd had at the casino to really transformed the way we went about recognizing and rewarding our team members at the aquarium. In the first year there, we got to our 20th anniversary. So we completely rejigged and reoriented how we went about recognizing those milestone anniversaries, even at the 1 year point. For our team members. It was something as simple as a mug, right? Like one of those, it wasn't Yeti, but it was a similar durable vacuum sealed mug that said 1 year anniversary Newport Aquarium. But it was like something people would look forward to at getting to their year point, right?
Yeah.
And then we started looking at the 5, 10, 15, and the 20 to really like think about how do we recognize those folks that have stuck around and been committed to this business over the decades, right? And then the other thing was we had a very normal HR team member of the month, right? Employee of the month program. It was built solely on the HFE culture of choose love. Now that I think Joel Manby was the former CEO before Andrew, and he did the Undercover Boss many years ago at Silver Dollar City in Dollywood.
Yeah.
And then went on to SeaWorld and did and released a novel on this whole concept of love, right? But him and the Hershon family kind of they take that passage from the Bible, love is patient, love is kind, it does not boast, and all those kind of things that describe the word love, and they kind of tie into each of those behaviors of love. And that was great, but what we saw was the same kinds of people were getting recognized each month because we were just rewarding one type of behavior. So we went back to the drawing board and we started to look at who the aquarium was as a whole. So we were all about creating memorable experiences for our guests. So that became a category. We didn't want to lose that ability to choose love and do the right thing with whoever, wherever, and whomever was there, whether it was by yourself when no one's watching or they are. Safety was huge for us because of being in an environment where we've literally got sharks in a tank that you could fall into, along with other chemicals and all the industrial stuff that comes with that. And then the environmental side of things. So like we had 4 different categories, and what we started to see, and we moved it to a bi-monthly because quarterly with how seasonality worked wouldn't have worked, and monthly would have just meant we wouldn't have had time to execute each month. So we went to bi-monthly, and we rewarded 4 team members every 2 months in those category areas. And we started to see different faces. We got a mix of supervisors, professional, hourly, part-time, seasonal team members getting recognized. And that also led to, at the end of the year, 4 team members getting recognized each year, and not just a professional team member as the team member of the year, which what we were seeing historically had been happening a lot. It was those professional team members that got kind of like the push above. Right. But I think the biggest success story with this was how we went from a model where the nominations would come in, an email would go out with those nominations, and maybe 40% of leadership would respond with their vote if we were lucky, to where we actually made it an in-person meeting where not only did we have our executive leadership, but we had managers from each business area as well who are working with those team members day to day, sat round a table, and we all would discuss for an hour each of these categories, the people that were voted and nominated, and vote as a group as to who should get it. And it really it let the leadership know a lot more about the business in terms of the people, rather than just the business, the numbers and the business results. So that was something that Kevin allowed me to kind of come in and take what I'd learned from the casino, and it just showed me how much I'd learned in those first 4.5 years. And then the last leader that really inspired me was probably my old sergeant in the police, Nigel Muir. He was getting towards retirement when I came in. I was having a bit of a rough time at the time, transitioning into this. I was young. I was 22, 23 years old. Dealing with what you deal with in the police, you can see a variety of different things. A little bit like not on the extremes do you see that sometimes in HR, but like you think about what our HR folks deal with each and every day. Yes, we're dealing with leaders and business needs and business results, but we're also dealing with real life situations that are impacting and affecting our team members. So in this role as a police officer, I was struggling with a little bit of that, but also kind of like having the self-confidence that I was good enough and able to make a difference. And he really like took me under his wing and guided me through the remainder of my probation, where after 2 years, I kind of passed through. I was fully kind of a police constable at that point, and then continued on for another 3.5 years before I moved to the States. But he had a big difference there. And then ultimately, the biggest impact for me is becoming a girl dad, right? I think nothing prepares you for becoming a parent, and it changes your whole outlook on life.
Yeah.
I think when you don't have kids, it's quite easy to get stuck into and immersed in your working world, because you don't have anything really to worry about. But when you become a family, and you have these little folks that are relying on you, it really inspires you to set a good example to them, right? And allow you, when you're dealing with struggle, when you're dealing with success, showing them how to do that with empathy and humility, and sometimes acceptance. Because while I am in transition and I'm looking for a job, I know I'm not the only one. I know that there are plenty of great HR team members out there.
Right.
And, there are going to be times where I interview for jobs and I might not even make the top 5. There might be times where I make the top 2 or top 3 and just get picked up by another HR professional, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's that there are good people out there that need work, and that's an important thing to remember. And they kind of keep me grounded on that.
And you can show your kids, right, that it is a competition, but it's not, right? Like, you can be a whole complete person and be incredibly happy for somebody else, and you just know that wasn't the one for me, right? Like, I believe everything happens for a reason. I'm brought to the things that I'm meant to be. I'm protected from things that I'm removed from. And that if something didn't work out, then that wasn't for me. That was meant for somebody else. And I have to believe that something better, that is more aligned with where I'm going, is what's coming. And I'm showing that to my kids, right? And you're leading that example as well.
Yeah, I really agree with that.
Badmouth somebody because you're jealous of something that they got that you didn't, because you're like, no, you know what, that was what was right for them, and I know that something else is right for me.
I wholeheartedly agree. I'm never gonna I'm never gonna begrudge someone because they got the job instead of me. I think just in general, in my whole life, I think things have happened for a reason. The chance to move over to the States and live 4,000 miles away from the rest of my family, giving up my career where I was actually the first in my family to follow in my grandfather's footsteps as a police officer. It was a job where I could have retired at 57. and while it was tough to give that up, and it was my dream job, because I really feel like it suited like who I am morally. I've always had kind of a high level of integrity and have tried to do the right thing. I've made mistakes. We're all human. We do that, right? But I think as long as your moral compass is heading in the right direction, that can say a lot about you. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to remember that we're all human. We have feelings, we have thoughts, and we're all in this together. And I think I was really joyed when you invited me to be on the podcast and to be your first guest as well. I think there's been a lot of that can-do attitude this last week, especially from yourself, Nicole, and I'm glad that I've been able to help you kind of push it over the line. But I think what you're trying to do here in giving people their voice to show what isn't on the resume, is hugely important, and I'm excited to see how this podcast continues to grow.
Well, thank you for it. You're gonna get me choked up. Thank you for that. Thinking along those lines, obviously, with people that were a big impact on you, what's your advice for the next generation of HR leaders that are coming up?
I think the biggest thing, and this kind of comes from the fact that I grew up in a completely different country, right? I think one of the biggest adjustments that I had to make when I moved to the States is that kind of always on attitude when it comes to work.
Yeah.
And it makes me look at things through a little bit of a different lens to a lot of my colleagues and folks that I work alongside sometimes. Because even when you're off, it feels like sometimes you're always having to be out of the house, running errands, taking kids to sporting events. There's no time to just sit down, relax, and enjoy the moment. And I think we need to do a lot more of that outside of work. I think we need to remember what COVID taught us 5 years ago. and go back to those roots of like, yes, work is important and we want to make a difference, but sometimes we do need to slow down to get things done. I've been on so many HR teams where you're just moving and moving and moving and moving that nothing actually gets done because it's not done at a quality. You're not taking the time to make sure it's done correctly. You're not, and that's not just HR, right? That's so many levels of business. There's such an urgency to get the next big bad best thing. And yes, when technology comes in, I think that's definitely something you can be utilizing and learn to utilize. But we're in such a rush to implement that we don't take the time to try and do it correctly sometimes. And I think that's something we could do better. But for a leader, I think it's having the grace with those you're guiding and remembering that you were in their shoes once as well. I think we've all been the new person on a team or been a person in a new role. The nerves, and I suffer from this a lot in the background of my, positive, outgoing exterior. Internally, I suffer from imposter syndrome all the time, particularly because of how I've come through HR. I know that I'm good at what I do and the way I connect with people and the difference I make on teams. But I think when you've got a leader that gives you grace, that has patience and wants to invest the time in you, that can make such a world of difference. And I think if you are an HR leader today, yes, I know you're under pressure from the C-suite and from leadership and shareholders, but don't forget why you joined people strategy and HR in the first place. And I can tell you, it wasn't about the numbers and the figures, which, it's a skill to have. Remember the fact that you joined HR because of people. We say it's cliche when someone says that, but you ask a Steve Brown, a Tom Mobley, a Melanie Boer, yourself, Nicole, and many others, especially locally here in Cincinnati, they didn't get into HR for the fame and the glory. They got into HR because they just wanted to make a difference each and every day and in whatever which way that looks like. And that's my motivation. My motivation's, don't get me wrong, money's great, right? Like getting rewarded for your skill set and your experience. I think you have to look for that. But that's not what motivates me. What motivates me is going into a team, being a part of that team and being part of something bigger than myself, but being able to each and every day make a difference with the team members I'm there to support and even the leaders I'm there to support to help guide them. And there's nothing more rewarding. No money can buy that feeling that you have when you know you've made a difference in someone's day.
Yeah. I talk to people about, imposter syndrome, and I know it's a buzzword and all of those things. And what I always remind them is the job was created for a reason, right? Your presence was invited to the meeting, on the project, whatever, for a reason. If you were there solely to remind about the budget, that's why the CFO was invited, right? If you were there to remind solely about, do we have the capacity to do XYZ, that's why operations is there. You were invited because your insight and input on how this is going to impact the culture, how this is going to impact the people, that's your whole purpose. And you just have to keep remembering that, because especially when you've been in it for a while, you can feel like, oh, well, that's just common sense. Like that everybody thinks that way. They don't. And you have to remember that you have a really specific purpose and there's a reason, and embrace that and be that person. Be the reason why they invited you to the meeting. And I had a boss that used to say this: if I invite you to a meeting and you don't participate, you don't get invited the next time, because your participation was wanted. Your insights were, we wanted to hear your contribution. And if you just show up and just kind of be a wallflower and observe and you don't actually participate, you're not invited next time, because that was not a good use of your time. And we're going to bring somebody in who's going to bring that perspective that we're looking for. And so, having that confidence and knowing that my contribution is needed, is welcome. And the quickest way to realize whether or not you're in an environment that truly wants that is are you invited to those meetings? And are you invited and encouraged to participate, or are you invited and encouraged to observe? Because that's a very quick indicator, at least for me, on whether or not the perception and the opinion and the experience of HR is welcome in that room.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So I know that you've been actively sharing your story on LinkedIn. How can our vast network, right, that we are counting on to share this, how can they help you? A lot of times people don't always know how to help. They need a specific ask. So how can people specifically help you?
I think for me, if you've resonated with anything that I say today, and you've had that feeling in your stomach of, wow, I could do with someone like Jamie on my team. Mm-hmm. Think about it, right? I think there's a conversation to be had there, but also, if you know someone who works in an environment where they could do with someone like me on their team, mm-hmm. Or maybe you know about an environment where a friend of yours has raved about in the HR world where they are in a place where they can grow, where they get encouraged to go to conferences and training seminars to help them develop on top of doing their own job. I get that. Mm-hmm. Or if you see something on my resume, or you've seen potential in me today to do something, maybe it's something I've not even thought about. Approach me, let me know. I'm open. I would prefer to stay in the HR space, but I'm not saying no to everything else. I think the one area I am avoiding for me is more so sales, because I'm not driven by that competitive nature in respect of, sales targets, sales goals.
Sure.
And that's just not who I am, right? But, maybe there's relationship building out there that I could offer a skill set in. I'd love to stay in the Cincinnati area if possible, but I am open to remote or travel. But the home is where your heart is, and that's where my kids and my family are. And they're not leaving Cincinnati anytime soon. So that's something to be conscious of. But also, and I've had a few folks do this in the last month, and it's been really rewarding, is, maybe you're in transition yourself, or maybe you're thinking about a career in HR. Send me a DM. Like, I'm more than willing to talk through things, meet with you. Yes. Guide you on my experience. I took my SHRM CP because I don't have an American qualification. And when I was applying for roles 7 years into my career, I was getting rejected because I had nothing that an ATS was going to recognize as making me qualified alongside my experience. Right. So maybe that's something you're thinking about. Get to the HR roundtables in Cincinnati with Steve Brown. The first Tuesday of every month, 8:30 to 9:30 over at the Great Oaks campus. Go to the hrnet.com. That's also a website that Steve runs. It has a newsletter each and every week. You'll have to get used to Steve's quirks and his song lyrics, but that's Steve. And he wears his flamboyant shirts for a reason. And he's really what I love about Steve is he really gets us to challenge the status quo of what HR has been previously and what it can be. Yes. But get networking, get connecting, go to Cincy SHRM, join, go to different events. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there in the HR world, because I'm telling you now, like, I've been building my HR network locally in Cincinnati and beyond, probably since 2018 more purposely. Mm-hmm. And it can lead not just to opportunities, but to resources and guidance that maybe you don't get at work as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always say my greatest strength is my network, right? I mean, I have an international network, and I learn so much from them. If you surround yourself by people that look like you, think like you, you're never going to learn anything. And you're also not getting the opportunity to share your own thoughts and experiences and see how it impacts other people, and learn new things and expand your horizons and all of those things. And so I just want to thank you for being my guest. If people are looking for you, is LinkedIn kind of the best place to find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place to find me. I've made it very simple, and I'm sure you'll tag me in the post later on. I'm tagged right now, but I'll be tagged in the post. Feel free to network with me, connect with me, share ideas. I think one thing I'm looking for right now for me as I go through this transition, I'm getting towards the end of a structured journal book that I've been using. I would be open to suggestions on any other structured journal ideas that people have. I think a big thing for me right now is keeping myself positive. I am with some of my confidence issues that I have beneath the surface. I want something that's going to continue to get me looking at the positives of what's going on around me and in my life. So if anyone has any good recommendations, I'll be open to those as well.
I'm going to connect you with Kevin Monroe and his gratitude practice. It's spectacular. I was a member of the group when I was going through my breast cancer journey, and of all the times that you need to really control your mindset and to have a practice of gratitude, that's certainly one of them. So I'm going to connect you with him.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate that, Nicole. Well, thanks again for having me on. I hope everyone's enjoyed getting to know me a little bit more. And hey, if it doesn't lead to a job, that's fine. But if it leads to at least someone knowing that we now have a platform to tell our story, and hopefully you get some more requests from folks to start filling your next weeks and months with continuing to drive this platform, then we've taken a step in the right direction, right?
That's right. Yeah, so I have 2 more guests lined up already, and we'll be working out the logistics of getting their shows scheduled and on air. And so, Jamie, thank you so much for joining me on our first live endeavor. And we'll get this wrapped up, get some show notes, get some links, get Jamie's resume out there so everyone can know how to connect with him, and stay tuned for updates for our next guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Happy Wednesday.
All right, we are no longer live.